Wa alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. Thank you guys for attending this second session of the Palestine Intensive. This presentation is intended to be a continuation of the first historical presentation in the first session. This presentation in particular is going to cover the history of Palestine from the Ottoman state to 1967. So two caveats before we begin. First, in terms of kind of the time scheduling, this presentation is going to go from 3:30 to 4:30. We're going to have a brief break at 4 for the Asr prayer. So, inshallah, this presentation will take around 45 to 50 minutes. The second caveat is if there's any part of the presentation, any part of the material that you'd like me to kind of go back over, kind of simplify, make sure that everybody's understanding is clear, feel free to raise your hand, let me know, and I'll pause, go back over any portion of the presentation that you'd like some clarity on. So, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So, we are going to start this presentation with the victory of the Ottoman Empire against a group called the Mamluks. The Mamluks before 1516 had control of the land of Palestine. The Ottomans will defeat them. They will conquer what is called in Arabic Bilad al-Sham. In English, the best term that's kind of the equivalent is, you may have heard, the Levant. That's going to include Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. So the Ottoman Empire is going to conquer Bilad al-Sham from the Mamluks. They're going to maintain control of Palestine for 4 centuries. So 1516 to 1917, which is going to be the end of World War I. These 4 centuries of rule over the land of Palestine by the Ottomans is going to be mostly peaceful, stable rule, good cooperation among the Ottoman authorities and the indigenous Arab populations in Palestine. There are going to be a few instances of conflict that will involve the region of Palestine. Oh, sorry. So the first 2 instances of conflict in the 1700s are local revolts. So this is going to be the indigenous Arab populations in Palestine revolting against the Ottoman governorship based in Jerusalem. You may have heard in Arabic Al-Quds, that is referring to Jerusalem. So these 2 revolts, the first 1703, the second 1746, is going to be a local revolt against the Ottoman authorities. That second revolt by the Zaydani family in Al-Jalil in Arabic, in English, the Galilee, we'll see about 3 to 4 decades of kind of autonomous control by the Arab populations against the Ottomans. But control over the Galilee will return to the Ottomans. There are 2 instances of foreign conflict that will come to the land of Palestine. The first is in 1799. So Napoleon Bonaparte, he's a French emperor, is going to attempt, but fail, he's going to attempt to conquer the city of Acre in English, Aqqa in Arabic. He's going to attempt to conquer Acre, fails to, and marches back to Egypt. Now, one of the primary motivations for Bonaparte for attempting to take over this region in Palestine is in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, you're going to see multiple European powers expand outside of the continent of Europe. They're going to attempt to colonize different parts of Africa, Asia, North and South America. So Napoleon Bonaparte, he will try to take different territories along the Mediterranean to form what are called kind of barrier states. Essentially, it's a competition between him as kind of the French leader against the British. In the Middle East specifically, the two main European powers that are going to be involved in conquering and colonizing is going to be the British and the French. You will have instances where smaller European powers will kind of play, they'll colonize smaller parts of the Middle East. So for example, the Italians will attempt to colonize Libya and so on, but it's the British and the French that are the two main European powers involved in colonization. Bonaparte fails in 1799 to take Acre and fails to take Palestine. He will have some control over Egypt around this time period. The second, so actually, I do want to point out one thing about this map. So this map is showing the widest extent of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, their court, their capital is going to be in Istanbul. It's labeled here as Constantinople. That's the old name, but Istanbul here, kind of between the Eastern Europe and Anatolia, kind of the Turkish peninsula. The reason I want to kind of just review this map is, we're talking about this area in our study of Palestine. Control by the Ottomans, the further out, this empire extends, control is going to be less controlling. They're going to have kind of less of a grip on the local populations. And this kind of sets up the second of the foreign conflicts in Palestine in the 17 and 1800s, which is actually going to be between the province of Egypt and Palestine. So this second foreign conflict is going to be led by a man named Ibrahim Pasha, and his father, Muhammad Ali Pasha. So the Egyptian province, which is going to be within the Ottoman Empire, but like many of the large empires, these empires are going to be split up into administrative units. It just makes it easier to kind of administrate when you have a local government, a provincial government, and then eventually the imperial government, which is based in Istanbul. So the Egyptian province is going to rise up in rebellion against the Ottomans, and they are going to march and invade Palestine in the 1830s. They do succeed for a period of time to occupy Palestine, Ibrahim Pasha and his father, Muhammad Ali Pasha. That control will not end until the Ottomans get 3 European nations involved to basically back them up into pushing Ibrahim Pasha out of Palestine and back into Egypt. The 3 European powers, you're looking at Austria, Great Britain, and Russia. Austria is, at this time, a sizable nation that's going to be southeast of Germany. Obviously, everybody knows Great Britain and Russia. But the Ottomans will essentially ask these 3 European powers to help them in fighting back Ibrahim Pasha's rebellion, which temporarily will hold control of Palestine. This foreign intervention in the mid-1800s begins kind of a domino effect where multiple European countries are going to take an increased interest in the Middle East. So after Ibrahim Pasha's rebellion is basically pushed out of Palestine, a number of European countries are going to open up consulates in Jerusalem. Britain is going to open up a consulate. Prussia, so for those who don't know, Germany was previously known as Prussia, so basically Germany, France, Spain, and Russia. They're going to all open consulates in Jerusalem and they're going to increasingly become involved in the local politics there. So we're going to kind of pause in that century of the 1800s, and we're going to talk about the Zionist political movement. Now, when it comes to the study of history, I usually encourage people to kind of treat it like detective work. All right, so we have this situation that we're looking at right now in Gaza, in the West Bank versus Israel. Kind of the detective's question is, how did it get to that point? So the genesis of this conflict will start with the rise of the Zionist movement. So the Zionist movement is going to be founded by Theodor Herzl. He is an Austrian journalist by profession. And this is really kind of important to note, Zionism, I'm being very particular about calling it a political movement. Herzl, the founder, was not a religious Jew. He did not have any education in Talmudic law, for example. He did not speak Hebrew or Yiddish, Yiddish being a dialect that was commonly spoken by certain European Jews. He was secular. The Zionist movement, was founded by secular Jewish elites. Keep in mind, when we use this word, when we say Jewish, it could be referring to one of two things. It could be referring to the religion, Judaism. It could be referring to kind of an ethnic group who claim descendants from the tribes of Israel, in Arabic, Bani Israel. So for Herzl, he was seeing it more through the lens of an ethnic group. He was not looking at it as a religious group. Very early on, Herzl, who's going to write, my German's terrible, Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, they're going to consider multiple locations for a formation of a Jewish state. Some of these include Uganda, which we're going to talk about further along in the presentation, Cyprus, Palestine, and some former USSR states, Soviet Union states. Very early on, they are going to hone in on, okay, Palestine should be the site of our colonial project. And we're going to talk about this colonial project in more detail. So this quote, which I'm not going to read word for word, it is going to be in the handouts. I'll explain the handouts a little bit more in a minute. This quote is found from a letter that Herzl wrote that's kept by the Chappelle Manuscript Foundation. It's alluding to the fact that Herzl is a secular Jew. He's not looking at this through like a religious lens. So before I go on, let me just make sure everybody's kind of understanding the handouts. The handouts will have a chronology of events in and concerning Palestine to 1948. The second chronology is about the Zionist movement. The fifth page will hopefully be incredibly important to everyone. It's QR codes. I have a public Google Drive with multiple primary sources. Just for the sake of saving paper, I figured, hey, let's do this virtually, set up a QR code so, during or after the presentation, feel free to scan to look through some of those primary sources. These primary sources are the basis of the presentation. So the Zionist political movement, they are going to kind of set their eyes on Palestine early on after kind of considering these other locations, Uganda, Cyprus, Soviet states. They are going to establish a number of financial vehicles to kind of raise funds. They're going to use those funds to form agricultural colonies in communes. In Hebrew, you may have heard kibbutzim. That's the plural for kibbutz, communes. Very early on, not all kibbutz were being settled in Palestine. In fact, some were being settled in South America, in Argentina, Brazil. Herzl and the very early Zionists, they're going to form the Zionist Congress. This Congress is going to be their way of trying to bridge the gap between this, very secular, wealthy elite and a lot of, middle class, lower class European Jews, and those who are going to be, strict in religious practice. So they're not, identifying as Jews, not just ethnically, but also religious. They're going to have over 10 different congresses held all in Europe, places like Basel, Switzerland, The Hague, Netherlands. And as you read through the documents from each of these Zionist congresses, you're going to see multiple kind of shifts in their planning. So one of those shifts is very early on, the Zionists said, okay, we need an internationally accepted charter for wherever we're going to put this Jewish state. They're going to shift away from that and say, look, we're just going to go in, we're going to set up our settlements, we're not going to care about international opinion. They're going to become a lot more ideological, a lot more aggressive in their approach. And the 6th and 7th Zionist Congress, 1903, 1905, they're going to throw out an offer from a British politician by the name of Joseph Chamberlain, in which he offers, look, we agree with you guys getting a Jewish state, come to Uganda and settle. The 6th and 7th Zionist Congress, they're going to agree, throw that idea out. We don't agree with it. We're not going to go along with it. And they're going to become a lot more committed to settling in Palestine, specifically. Essentially, the 6th and 7th Zionist Congress, they say, look, anybody comes with any other ideas of where to settle, we're going to ignore them. Our focus is now on Palestine. So we kind of gone over, one of the shifts in their motivations and in their planning is they're going to move away from gaining international acceptance towards practically going in, settling. They're not going to concern themselves with the opinion of other countries. So one thing to keep in mind is the Zionists, their colonial project in Palestine, they are not going to have any regard for the fact that there's already indigenous populations living there. This is not, you're not settling Mars where there's nobody there. You're settling a land that is already inhabited, that's already being farmed, lived on. You've got industries throughout Palestine. So this is something very important to keep in mind. They're not settling an empty desert. This is a common refrain that you'll find in Herzl's writings. Is, the Zionists, we're going to settle this empty desert and we're going to turn it into a garden. There's also this elitist attitude where they viewed themselves as Zionists to be intellectually superior to the indigenous populations already there. Now, I've got a question. Has anybody heard of John Locke? You can raise your hand. Okay, so you've heard him. Anybody else heard of John Locke? You've heard? Okay. So John Locke, he's a British intellectual. However, we want to use that word. He's a British intellectual who provides the excuse, and I'm saying excuse, not a reason. It's not a justifiable reason, but he provides the excuse for the Americans when they first colonized North America. The British colonists colonized North America, because when the British colonists came to North America, there was already indigenous populations living there. The Native Americans, Amerindians, however you want to, whatever term you want to use, there's already indigenous populations that settled the eastern seacoast here in the United States. They had their own farms, they had their own industries. Did it look exactly like London? No, not at all. Different culture. But John Locke provides this very shaky excuse that it was almost the responsibility for the British colonists to come in and civilize these indigenous populations. The Zionists are going to apply the same kind of logic. There's already indigenous Palestinian, Arabs living in the region of Palestine, but they adopt this idea that we're going to come into the empty desert. It wasn't empty, and not all of it's desert. We're going to come into the empty desert, and we're going to turn it into a garden. Wherever we moderns go with our inventions, we transform the land. Another unfortunate sleight of hand that they would use is this claim that, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to, create our communes, our settlements on already inhabited land, and the Palestinians are going to benefit from our colonization, which, to use the Urdu term, it's bakwas, it's nonsense. When the Zionists established their first colonies in Palestine, they're taking over land that's already inhabited, land that's already being farmed. Another thing that they do is they will purchase, in Turkish, and my Turkish is terrible, I think it's called miri. It's land that essentially tenant farmers were living on. So these tenant farmers, who were Palestinian Arabs, they didn't own the land, but they had a right to live on it, to farm on it. So the Zionists were coming in, they were purchasing this miri, this land. They were kicking the Palestinian Arab farmers, the tenant farmers, off the land. They were preferring, look, we're only going to use Hebrew labor. So that's, all of that is adding up to this kind of program where the Zionists are systematically moving in, taking over land. They'll purchase land where there's tenant farmers, removing those Arab tenant farmers and bringing in their own Hebrew labor. It's a systematic approach where you're slowly kicking the Palestinians off of their rural land. Early on, the Palestinian farmers who were being kicked off their land by the Zionists, they were moving to major cities, Haifa, Jerusalem, and so on. The Ottomans will try to create regulations to try to stem the tide of Zionists moving in to the region of Palestine. Unfortunately, going back to that second sort of foreign intervention where you had Austria, Britain, and Russia intervening when Ibrahim Pasha invaded Palestine, the British, they built consulates in Jerusalem. They continued to pressure the Ottomans into looking the other way when Zionists were trying to, make land purchases, when they were evacuating these Arab tenant farmers off of their land. So the Zionists, they would form these financial vehicles where they were purchasing land, building settlements. So you had the Jewish National Fund, the Jewish Colonization Association. So one of the ways that the Zionists were kind of basically trying to boost their population in the first settlements that they were forming was they would tell their members in Europe, come to, get like a passport to Palestine, claim you're going for pilgrimage, right? Claim you're coming for pilgrimage, overstay your passport, just go ahead and park at one of the settlements that we're forming. The Ottomans will attempt to kind of revoke that kind of loophole. Unfortunately, Britain, France, and the United States will apply pressure to force Ottomans to basically back off from regulating these passports where the Zionists were claiming, oh, we're coming for pilgrimage. They had an ulterior motive. And the Ottomans were pressured into kind of allowing that to continue. The local administration in Jerusalem, Sanjaq al-Quds, they're going to temporarily bar land purchases from 1897 to 1901. There are a few instances where Palestinian farmers were successful in getting land sales abrogated. One such instance occurred in Tiberias. The president of the Jewish Colonization Association, his name is Narcissus Levine, he tried to purchase 31,500 dunams. I think dunams is a Turkish land unit, about 900 square meters. Each dunam is 900 square meters. So he had a land sale abrogated by the Ottoman court, but more often than not, these land purchases were able to continue. And like I said, with the land purchases, a lot of them were of state land where you had Arab tenant farmers working the land. They didn't own it, but they were allowed to work the land. And the Zionists were kicking these people off of this land and basically hiring more Zionists who were immigrating into Palestine. Just out of respect of time, it is 3:58. Asr is going to be at 4 o'clock, I believe. We'll go ahead and pause for about 5 minutes. We'll pray, come back, and then I will continue to about 4:30, inshallah. Any questions before we break? Is everything clear? So, yeah.
So, how were they able to kick out? Because it's a state-owned.
So it was state-owned. So it was previously owned by the state, the Ottoman Empire, but they were selling it to the Zionists. The Zionists, once they owned that land, then they had the right to kick off the tenant farmers. The tenant farmers did not own, the Turkish term is miri, M-I-R-I. The Arab tenant farmers did not own that land, but legally they were permitted to work on it by whoever owned it. So when it was in the Ottoman hands,
a bit like sharecropping. Yeah.
Similar to sharecropping. So when it was Ottoman hands, of course, the Ottoman farmers are able to live on it, farm it. The Zionists, as they were purchasing this land, they were basically telling the Ottoman farmers, you're no longer allowed on this land to live on it, to work it. We're going to hire the Zionist immigrants who were coming at the time. So they're kicking the Palestinian tenant farmers off and hiring their own labor. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
In your slides and all these exhibits you're showing, it seems that all the documents have Arabic and Hebrew like text. What's the explanation behind that?
So this one in particular,
This one doesn't, but the ones before.
because this is a land deed. So okay, just out of respect, since we're presenting in the Musalla, like I don't have like pictures of like faces or anything, so I decided to use like primary source documents, maps. So this is a land deed.
There's one.
Okay, so the Anglo-Palestine Company. So this was a bank branch that was opened by the Zionists in cooperation with the British at the time.
Okay.
So you'll have, especially in like Jerusalem, you're going to have a lot of documents that will have Hebrew, that will have Arabic. Bear in mind, before the Zionists arrived, there were Palestinian Jews living there. So of course you're going to have that usage of Hebrew, of Arabic. Yeah.
So who did they buy the land from?
The Turkish company.
The Ottoman state. So the Ottoman state, very early on, there is no understanding that this is like a planned maneuver to purchase land. They thought, okay, we're just selling to Jews, no problem, because we've had Jews in Palestine since forever, no problem. You get to maybe the 1910s, 1920s, then you start seeing the Palestinian population and the Ottoman Authority, they're starting to wake up and go, oh, we're not just selling to just practicing Jews, we're selling to Zionists who have this kind of mission in mind.
Land did they buy? 3%.
About, 3 to 4%. These colonies, so like Petah Tikva is considered like the first Zionist colony. These are just settlements. They're not buying like entire, swaths of the Palestinian land. Yeah.
All of the lands that were purchased didn't exceed 3% of the whole Palestine.
Yeah. Go ahead and close here. Okay. So we'll go to for those who are praying Asr, we'll complete the Asr and then we'll pick back up. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Already registered. My daughter registered.
You can pass it down.
And put the name and
You sign up online.
All right, we'll go ahead and pick back up. A couple of things to note as we kind of talk about early Zionist colonization efforts. The Zionist political movement, they were unfortunately very crafty at bypassing legal frameworks, finding loopholes, as well as just outright disregarding kind of legal stipulations. So, we talked about the sale of Miri, the Turkish state-owned kind of sharecropped land. A lot of those sales had stipulations where you were not allowed to kick off kick out the farmers, the Arab farmers who were living and working that land. Unfortunately, the Zionists disregarded these legal stipulations. The question kind of, then becomes, well, what did the Ottomans kind of do in response? We're going to cover kind of the decline of the Ottomans in a second, but briefly, I wanted to touch on, we talk about the Zionists, they're shifting tactics. One of those shifts is the formation of multiple paramilitaries. So you'll have the Bar Giora militia in 1907, the Hashomer in 1909. They're considered kind of the predecessor to the Haganah in 1920. You'll have the Irgun formed in 31, and the Lehi Stern gang in 1940. These armed groups were employed to basically harass and deter resistance by the indigenous Palestinian Arabs, the Ottoman authorities, and as we get closer to 1940, we're going to see eventually these same paramilitaries are going to execute military actions even against the British. So I just wanted to talk on that. This map is pretty useful in kind of showcasing the growth in settlements. These settlements are nothing more than, villages and towns. It's not entire like swaths of territory. We're not talking about like a nation state here. These are just, these villages and towns that they're going to form. So, the question might be asked, okay, why didn't the Ottomans, do more in terms of opposing the Zionist project? Unfortunately, during the same time period, you're going to see the Ottoman Empire affected by multiple issues, the first being an internal revolution by what are known as the Young Turks in 1908. This kind of revolution is taking place on the Turkish peninsula where the capital, Istanbul, is found. You're also going to see the Ottoman Empire enter World War I in 1915. They're going to participate alongside Germany, what used to be Prussia, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. Keep in mind, this is World War I. So these are basically imperial nations fighting against one another. They're going to be fighting the British and the French and the Russians. Specific to the Ottoman Empire, one of the major military campaigns that Britain, France, and Russia wage is known as the Gallipoli campaigns. I may be mispronouncing that. But once again, this is taking away from military ability to kind of oppose the Zionist project. The Young Turk Revolution is going to kind of weaken their ability to domestically and legally deal with increased Zionist settlement, increased instances where the Zionists are kicking Palestinian farmers off their land, bypassing legal legislation, and finding loopholes. The Ottoman Empire, at this point, they are weakening. The British, during World War I, they are going to interact with Arabs and other non-Turkic ethnic groups within the Ottoman Empire to try to cause more internal rebellion and revolt. So once again, the Ottoman Empire is on the decline. Their ability to address the Zionist issue is weakening over time. So Ottoman state is going to become divided at the end of World War I. Britain and France in particular are going to divide up the lands in the Middle East that were previously under Ottoman rule. You may have heard the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This is kind of mapping out the divisions between what's going to be British-controlled, French-controlled, where can Britain kind of have an involvement in the governance of a country, where can France have control over the governance. The Hussein McMahon correspondence is an important primary source in that it kind of showcases where Britain was going into the Ottoman Empire trying to get non-Turkic ethnic groups to rise in rebellion against the Ottomans during World War I. And then you have the infamous Balfour Declaration. Balfour Declaration is Britain's promise to the formation of a Jewish state in Palestine. It's essentially Britain saying, we're going to back your play, Zionists. Whatever you need from us, we will support you. Some other interesting primary sources, though, during the same time period are listed at the bottom. You'll have the King Crane Commission. The King Crane Commission, it was a commission that was originally supposed to involve the Europeans, but ultimately it was just the United States that took part. And it's the one kind of commission, the Americans at the time were frank and they said, we don't think the formation of a Zionist, of a Jewish state is going to be good in Palestine. You're going to have a lot of problems come out of that. Unfortunately, that is kind of the minority opinion, especially with the Balfour Declaration. You're going to see primarily Britain, they're going to take an interest in supporting the Zionist project. The Shaw Commission report, this is issued, there's going to be increased tensions between especially disenfranchised Palestinian Arabs who are kicked off their land, that are moving into the major cities like Al-Quds of Jerusalem, Haifa. There's going to be increased tension between them and Zionist Jews. The Shaw Commission report is going to study one instance where there was essentially kind of an outbreak of violence between the groups. And the Shaw Commission, they concede that, look, we're backing the Zionist project. Essentially, you can't be surprised that there's going to be increased violence because you've got, the disenfranchised Palestinians upset at losing land, losing property. Many Palestinians are going to be killed by these Zionist paramilitaries. Initially, the Bar Giora militia, the Hashomer, later on the Haganah and the Irgun. There we go. So I'm not going to get up for this one, but this is essentially the Sykes-Picot agreement, the kind of where they were dividing. So the red is going to be either directly controlled by the British or it's going to be a government that's overseen by the British, essentially the same thing. The blue is going to be the French. Early on, they're going to claim that, okay, Palestine will be, an internationally governed zone. Very quickly, though, the British mandate period begins, and it's going to be the British that are going to be involved in Palestine. And you're going to have instances where the British are going to hire Zionist paramilitaries to basically police the Palestinians, which is incredibly terrible idea, seeing as the Zionists, at this point, it's clear to both the indigenous population, as well as the Ottomans until their fall, it's going to become apparent that, okay, this is a purposeful colonial project by the Zionists. The British are going to hire,
Just really quickly for context, the Balfour Declaration was made in 1917, and I was always under the impression that it was like a major influence of backing Zionism was World War II, but obviously that's before. So what was like the main motivation for them deciding to do that?
So the Balfour Declaration is kind of the earliest commitment. The Zionist political movement, they're always going to be kind of interacting with their European counterparts. I know that I'm trying to remember one of the Zionists, like the early leaders, he actually invented smokeless gunpowder, which was a major benefit for the European powers during World War I. So it's kind of this exchange of, we have these inventions. You're going to kind of support us. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. The Balfour Declaration, like you pointed out, was made before World War II. It's a common misconception that, the eventual state of Israel was kind of this almost like makeup for the Holocaust. The Zionist movement started in 1890. This train was already on its tracks way before World War II. The World War II just provided impetus for the Zionists to say, hey, let us increase immigration. But once again, this project started before World War II. The Balfour Declaration. Keep in mind, these early Zionists, they're not the Semitic Jews that were living in Palestine. These are European Ashkenazim Jews, for example. They were living in Europe. They were already kind of brushing shoulders with these European powers. A lot of them are the wealthy secular elite, so they're brushing shoulders with British politicians, French politicians. They're getting support that way. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I just wanted some context.
Yeah,
That's great.
You're totally fine. So we're talking about kind of a shift in tactics for the Zionists. One of these shifts is this, and this actually highlights another legal loophole that the Zionists were abusing within what used to be the Ottoman Empire, eventually the British Mandate period. The Zionists would go in night, build up these watchtower and stockade settlements on Palestinian land. Now, there's an Ottoman law where an illegal building which is completed with a roof, you can't tear down. So what they were doing was at night, they'll hop the fence, they'll hop the border, build one of these watchtower settlements on Palestinian land and say, you can't tear it down. British, unfortunately, will back them up on this kind of development where they would just go, build these tower and stockade settlements, settle there. Next night, go, build a new one. It's got a roof, can't tear it down. It's another one of those loopholes that they would abuse. And so all of these tactics are building up. You're having increased number of Palestinian Arabs who were living in the rural areas. They were farmers, being dispossessed of their land. They're moving into the cities. You're going to see more frustration build up over time as these people are moving into the cities, expressing their frustration. After World War I, bear in mind, the British Mandate period essentially begins. So the British they're running the administration in Palestine. They're enabling the Zionists. They're not really supporting the Palestinian Arabs who have justifiable frustrations. You're going to have increased poverty, these tenant farmers being kicked off their land. They're not able to find work. Another thing that adds up is you're going to start seeing the paramilitaries, the Zionist paramilitaries, receive weapon shipments in the port cities along the Mediterranean. Palestinian Arabs are going to find out about these shipments. All of this kind of sets a pressure cooker that kind of blows with what's called the Great Arab Revolt in 1936, where the Arabs are going to rise up against British rule, against the Zionist project. The Peel Commission is issued during this time. This is going to be kind of the first mention of an idea of partition, where officially we're going to split Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Obviously, the Arab state has never been realized. You also have the British. They're going to hire these Zionist paramilitaries to police the Palestinians, destroy and raid villages throughout the 1930s. Okay, so we're going to get up to World War II, beginning of World War II, 1939. You're going to have the Irgun and the Haganah. The Lehi Stern Gang is another major Zionist paramilitary. They're going to kind of use this period. So World War II, you've got, Britain, France opposing Nazi Germany, Japan, fascist Italy. So the attention is going to kind of move off of Palestine by the British because they're involved in World War II. Irgun and the Haganah, they're going to start bombing campaigns against the Palestinians. This is in order to spread panic across the populations, try to, cause the Palestinians to evacuate homes, villages. And during this time, the British are going to issue what's called the MacDonald White Paper. The MacDonald White Paper, it's a document that upsets the Zionists because it's the British kind of saying, okay, the Zionists are going a little too far. They still keep to the Balfour Declaration. That declaration, they're always going to hold on to. In fact, the MacDonald White Paper, the author is going to issue another document where he says, look, I'm going to keep by the Balfour Declaration, but this MacDonald White Paper upsets the Zionists. The Zionists will then turn against the British mandate, and you're going to see bombing campaigns, kidnappings of British officers. You're even going to see the assassination of, I believe, Lord Walter Moore. He's a foreign secretary for Britain. So by 1930, 1940s, you're seeing the Zionist movement they're going to move towards military means to achieve their goal. Increasingly, so they don't care for international acceptance. They're not even concerned about purchasing more land. At this point, okay, by military means are we going to achieve our goal of a Jewish state? The Zionists are going to turn to military means. You'll see the Zionist Biltmore Conference in 1942 outright has U.S. congressmen suggesting to FDR that we need to support a Jewish army for the Zionists. And just, I want to be careful of time. I'm going to try to wrap this up. So this builds up to what is known as the Nakba, translates to catastrophe. So 1947, you're going to have the United Nations are going to decide on a partition. The Resolution 181, we're going to partition Palestine. We're going to give Zionists 55% of the land. That land is going to have at least 47% Arabs. And the Arab state, so the second half of this partition, is never realized because by 1948, the Zionists will forcibly expel and kill upwards to 3/4 of a million Palestinians, 750,000 Palestinians. They're being expelled from the land, being killed. You're going to have the Haganah and the Irgun. They're going to commit major atrocities. So I've listed Deir Yassin, Mazar. That is not an exhaustive list. There's more villages, but these two are commonly known. These villages will be completely wiped out. Images and stories of these war crimes are going to be spread among the Palestinian population to try to get them to run. Like, we're pushing you out of Palestine. If we have to tell you, the horrible things that we've done, we're going to incite fear among the populations to force them out. Zionists will establish Israel in 1948. United States is going to immediately recognize them, as well as Soviet Russia in the same year, Britain and France, multiple European countries within the next year or two. But the Nakba is that full military campaign. So the Israelis will refer to it as Plan Dalet. It's a full military campaign. At this point, this is ethnic cleansing en masse. We are forcing the people out of their villages, killing them, stealing their property, forced expulsion. So one thing that Ahmed and I are going to kind of tag team and address is, you have this map, so British mandate. Most of this is inhabited, occupied by the Palestinians. 1917, 1948, the Nakba. You're going to have this mass expulsion. You are going to have Gaza and West Bank. By 1967, though, this is fully occupied. And this is a point that I don't think most Americans understand. There is no Palestinian state. Gaza and West Bank is occupied. It's a full military occupation by 1967. This partition plan that the United Nations tried to execute, Israel got what they wanted. The Palestinian Arabs never been able to realize their own state. That's just the plain truth of it. Okay, so, and I'm going to try to keep this short. I know I'm a little over time. So after the Nakba, you'll have the West Bank is going to be administered by Jordan up until 1967. Gaza will be administered by Egypt till 1967. You'll have a brief period in 56. The Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, they're going to once again, at this point, this is naked aggression. There is no defending this. They're going to basically dismiss the UN, and they'll claim, okay, Jerusalem is our capital, which, as part of that UN partition plan, was Jerusalem was intended to be an internationally governed region. Israel says we don't care. We're claiming Jerusalem as our capital in 1950. The nationality law of Israel is the one that's granting automatic citizenship to all Jews, is horridly discriminatory towards Palestinian Arabs. So they're not getting the same citizenship recognition, none of that. Prevention of Infiltration law in 1954, this is going to bar Palestinians from even crossing the border to try to find family members, try to collect lost property. Many times, Israel will shoot and kill any Palestinian who's crossing those borders. So basically crossing out of Gaza or out of the West Bank to look for lost family members, stolen property, lost property, try to, gather their belongings. The Knesset, they'll create this law where it's like, no, we're not going to let you cross the border. And many times, the Israelis will kill anybody who crosses. All right, 2 more and then we're done. So these paramilitaries, they're going beyond simple armed conflict, simple, fights that break out. They're going to have different tactics to kill Palestinians, to incite fear, to cause discord among the Palestinians and among the neighboring Arab nations. So you'll have, for example, the King David Hotel bombing by the Irgun. Lehi Stern gang will have letter bombs in London against the British. Semiramis Hotel by the Haganah. There's going to be multiple kidnappings. There's going to be multiple assassinations, including British Minister of State. So he's Minister of State, not Foreign Secretary. That's my mistake. In Cairo in 1944. And then a Swedish UN mediator in 1948, Folke Bernadotte, is going to be assassinated. You'll have car bombings by these various Israeli or Zionist paramilitaries. And you have what's called the Lavon Affair in 1954. So once again, not only is the Zionists, they're harming the Palestinian Arabs, they're also involving themselves in Arab countries on their border. The Lavon Affair was an attempt by Israel to set off multiple bombs in Egypt against European and Egyptian targets. Their intention was, okay, we're going to blame the Muslim Brotherhood, political party in Egypt, but the plan fails, and Lavon retires. And then, so we're going to get up to 1967. That's where I'll kind of, stop. You will have the formation of the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Fatah, in 1957. It's an activist organization. It's a debate at the time in how to redress the grievances of the Palestinian Arabs. Some will go for more political means, some will go for military means to redress the fact that, okay, all these Palestinians have been forcibly expulsed from their land. How are we going to address that? By 1967, you're going to have a full military occupation of all of Palestine. This is including Gaza, the West Bank. Israel will even go outside of those borders, invade the Sinai, Golan Heights in Syria, and what's known as the 7 Days War. The United Nations, they issue this Resolution 242 demanding Israel pull out of Gaza and West Bank. Israel does not follow this. This is a full military occupation. That Resolution 242, unfortunately, it's a toothless document. The UN doesn't go into to forcibly force it, Israel's going to disregard this. In 67, you'll have a full occupation of Palestine, including Gaza in the West Bank by Israel. I'll go ahead and kind of wrap it up here. Are there any questions that anybody has? As a material, yeah.
Did you come across the story of the Tantura town? Right, this is the one of the cities on the Mediterranean.
I'll talk about it.
Close, oh, you're gonna talk about it?
Yeah.
There's a documentary on it.
Yeah. Also, please bear in mind, there's a lot to cover. So this is not a comprehensive. It would take multiple hours to go over everything comprehensive. Hopefully, this presentation addresses kind of how we got to kind of post-1967 a full military occupation of Palestine, how the Zionists got to the position where they could execute the Nakba. Hopefully this presentation kind of covers that, inshallah. Thank you guys so much. I know there'll be a Q&A at the end of the entire program, so if you have any questions, either once I'm kind of off the podium, feel free to pull me aside and ask me, or the Q&A at the end of the program. Jazakallah khairan.
Did you want to show the QR code?
Oh, yeah. For those who did not get a handout, here's a QR code. It not only includes the handout that you have, it's also a repository of primary sources that were used to develop this presentation. So a lot of like the Hussein McMahon correspondence, Sykes-Picot agreement, all of those primary sources will be found in this repository. So thank you.